Yahoo!
Okay.
Here we are.
Woohoo! Over the money fence, July. I'm telling you, the months are rolling by quickly already.
I know.
aren't they?
I can't believe it.
I know. It's like the feedback that we're getting is just awesome. But I tell you what, it's great having Roger back here, and I believe you've been doing something with fast cars and speeding things. There's no stopping Roger.
He's our action
Roger
man.
Montgomery.
When we spoke yesterday, I'd just been with some colleagues. We were invited to a private racetrack on the Central Coast, and people brought various cars, and we got to drive them very fast around the track, which was just fantastic fun. And it was great to see your own driving improving over the course of the day. It was good fun.
We've always called you Tom Cruise. What was the film? Was it not Top Gun. What was the one where he was the racing car driver?
Days of
Oh,
Thunder.
all the
There
girls
you go.
watching you, eh?
Exactly.
That's living
See,
up
from
to
the
his
planes to driving fast.
And you know
Well, I
what's
don't know
really
that there was-
interesting?
I don't know if there was any thunder. It might have been just a rolling sort of storm on the hill, but I'm not sure there was thunder.
You never cease to amaze us. You are action man. But look,
I love that.
I want to tell you something about me getting dressed this morning. I know this is really seems random left field.
Yes, it doesn't
but you're
seem related
used to
racing
us.
cars.
You're
Yeah.
used to us,
Yeah.
and you know how we all just jump
Yes.
around.
Money
It's all good.
talks.
Money. But this morning I'm getting dressed and I'm thinking I need to be a little bit more formal because we're talking about finance.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then I'm in the car going, what is that about? You know, it's like you get dressed to go to the lawyers. In the old days, you used to go to the doctor and getting
Or to
dressed
go to the bank.
Oh, the
If you're
bank,
going to
yeah,
borrow-
to see
then
the
you
bank
dressed
manager.
up
Yeah.
to see the bank manager.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
thought how the world has changed. Even though I was, like, remember last time with Roger, put my pearls on?
I
you
did.
know?
She got dressed up quite.
Yeah, and I just thought
pearls came out.
how you relax when I sit with Roger, and believe me, I've been at parties and I've been very social lately, and people are talking about you, Roger, watch out.
Yeah.
And they're just saying you make it real. You make it relatable.
Sure.
And honestly, we spend a lot of time searching for someone like Roger to actually make fun, to relax people. And hey, I'm dressing differently. I'm not dressing in a suit with pearls
You look
now.
pretty, Di,
I'm
in the green.
But I've toned it down a bit because I'm more relaxed talking
That's
about
good.
finance.
Good.
I just want to throw that
Great.
out there.
And
we
was
were just
that
chatting about it.
realisation before or after you dreamt about the business cards?
Roger, don't tell them this is about my dreams.
That's right.
How boring. I dreamt about a business card.
But it's funny.
Oh, my
it's true how things
God.
have changed.
I need help.
I was with the airlines too, and it used to be back in the day, if you were in first class or business class, you would need the jacket on, and
Yes.
people would get dressed
Yes.
up. And there was
Yeah.
no such thing as ripped jeans
But
or
you
anything
still look like the
that.
host. You look
I'll put
gorgeous.
the scarf
And
on
now-
today.
and now we're
Touch
the
up
capital-
before you touch
Touch up,
down.
got my
Now
little
we're
lippy on.
aren't we the world capital of the tracky dacks?
Yeah.
Don't people you used to dress up to fly, and now
Yeah,
people
it's
dress
true.
down to fly.
I know, that's it.
My son was
exactly.
horrified out of Singapore last year. We've got to get into finance, but he was on a what was the plane? It was a
Scoot or
scoot.
something, or-
Someone
yeah.
came down with bare feet and a
squish, squish, it's a
bing
no-go.
tang singlet.
Oh, dear.
And he's not a snob, but he likes to dress well. And he was
Yeah.
like, "Oh my God, I've now seen everything." Bare feet. He just went. Anyway,
Anyhow,
moving on.
let me start this.
Right.
So let's go. Welcome to Over the Money Fence. This is a podcast that helps you take control of your finances with clarity and confidence. And I'll tell you what, we are feeling a bit more confident now. In our last episode, we heard from so many women in their 50s and 60s feeling stretched. And I think we called that like the sandwich generation.
That's
You know,
right.
caring for aged parents, supporting adult teens, and trying to protect their own future at the same time. So today we're stepping back and we're asking a bigger question. What does smart investing look like at every age and stage?
I love that.
Yeah.
And look, honestly, it doesn't matter if you're starting a new career, rebuilding, post-divorce, or planning for a secure future ahead of you. It doesn't matter what it is. To be honest with you, we're so happy to welcome back our favourite finance expert and friend of the podcast, Roger. He's the founder and chairman of Montgomery Investments Management and, of course, a well-known media identity who just somehow manages to help us, like I just said, to make the most out of our money in a very relatable way. So welcome, Roger Roo.
It's great to be with you.
Roger
Thanks for having me.
Roger Roo's your new...
And I have all my limbs intact after yesterday's efforts on
Thank
the track.
God.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
you know what, Roger, let's sort of start now sort of really at the beginning, because we've had a lot of feedback too from sort of people even of our children's age too, you know, in their 20s and 30s. Is it like the Millennials or Gen Y? I don't think we sort of say that anymore. But, you know, so like a lot of them, they're starting out, they've got their career, they're paying off their HECS debts, or they're sort of saving for their first home or a wedding. And, you know, like sort of...
Gosh, a wedding.
I know. Oh, yeah. You know, like...
Elope.
Elope. That's it.
That's so true. That's
did.
really good
I
advice,
did.
Di.
But
I
like,
took
you
the
know,
money and ran.
one of the ones, I just want to read it out to you because it's got, you know, here, I'm working hard, I'm saving a bit, I'm paying off my HECS, but I've got no idea where to start when it comes to investing.
Okay.
Because it's hard enough just to even get enough money to start. So you know,
So if you're in your...
what do you do?
Yeah, you're in your 20s or early 30s, well, the first thing to know is that you think about a ski slope with lots of snow on it, and you start with a snowball at the top and you roll it down. It collects snow and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, the fortunate thing that you have at that age is you have a very long ski slope. You're going to accumulate a lot over your life, particularly if you work hard or you start a business and you're very good at what you do. Because you've got that long slope ahead of you, that long runway of life, you can afford to take a few risks early.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to... Don't be too fearful about stepping out and having a go. Because at that age, whatever mistake you make, it's more than likely that you'll make that money back, assuming you're not being really stupid. But you can take some risks. I remember when I was at uni, a friend of mine and I, we got together, this is down in Melbourne, we got together and we decided to do something incredibly risky. We had no idea what we were doing. We decided to open a futures trading account together.
Right.
And we're going to, and these are derivatives, and we're not even going to talk about them.
Nick and I decided to open a bottle of champagne together.
Well, that's as you do.
That era.
I'm sure we opened a few of those as well. But we opened a futures trading account. Now, a friend of mine, he was very wealthy, so he just had $10,000. This is back in the late 80s, and he put that $10,000 into the account. I didn't have $10,000, so I got my mum to borrow the money from the bank on my behalf because they wouldn't give me the money. And she went guarantor on this loan or co-borrow or whatever it was, borrowed the $10,000 for me, and we combined the money and we started trading futures. And it went really well.
Wow. And you're at
really
uni.
well. We're at uni.
Hold on, there's got to be an until.
Yes, it's coming.
I don't know
You
why
know
I sense
there
that.
is.
I'm on the ski slope now. You're hitting some rocks.
Perhaps in all the Tom Cruise
No, I'm in your
Well,
visual.
it's a really bad season. It's Australia, remember? So
Lots
they're
of mud
sending
and
you
rocks.
photos. They send you photos on the email of how good it is.
It's true.
And then when you look at the ski cam,
Yeah,
the snow
it's
cans,
true.
hey, that's no
It's
snow.
snowmaking,
Anyway, yeah, that's right. So we started to go really well. In fact, we were going so well that I thought, why am I at uni? You know, I don't
Wow.
need, I
Okay,
don't
yeah.
need to study. This is so easy. Anyway, it was going really well, and then it turned and it stopped going well. And I remember I got in the car. Mum was taking me to the bus stop to go to uni, and I put on 3KZ in Melbourne. And
remember that.
Yeah, 3KZ.
Yep.
Anyway, I put it on, and the news came on. The Dow Jones had gone down, and Mum said, "What does that mean?" I said, "Oh, it's not good."
It's about the money
It's
you
not
loaned
good.
me, Mum. I'm just getting out of the car now.
Anyway, got together with my friend. Got together with my friend, and we discussed it. And we said, "Look, it's gone down. It's never gone down this much before. But of course, our experience was only the last 3 months, and it had never gone down this much before. It'll be fine. It'll bounce. It'll go back up." And the next day, 3KZ on again. Mum asked how it was going. I said, "Oh, it's even worse than yesterday." Anyway, we lost all the profit that we made, and I think we turned our $20,000 into $40,000 or something, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, doubling it.
In the 80s too.
In the 80s.
Wow.
Anyway,
It's rolling in it.
Then we lost all of the profit and we lost all of our original $10,000. I ended up working.
Oh, you lost the lot.
Lost the
So
lot.
you had to pay your mum back?
I love how you're worrying about mum. I'm worrying about the money.
Gorgeous. She's
You're
an
worrying
immigrant
about
and
mum. I
everything
love
she's
it.
gone through, and you've
So
told some
next
I ended up
stories
working at the
about your mum.
I ended up working at the Cadillac Bar in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and I worked at a fish and chip shop to get the money together to pay my mum back.
Oh my gosh.
So, but the point was, at no point was I stressed. It seemed like all the money in the world at the time, but I knew that if I worked hard and I was diligent, then when I got to 50 years old, I'd look back and I'd say, well, that was nothing.
No.
And fortunately,
Life experience.
So
fortunately,
what
that
did you
happened.
learn from that, Roger?
So the lesson is you can afford to take some risk early, provided you cap it. You don't go crazy, but you can afford to take, when you're young, a few more risks. Don't be afraid to lose a little bit of money learning to invest. And in fact, there's a famous quote: "We learn more from loss than from confusion." You learn more from getting it wrong and making a mistake than from not knowing what you're doing and not taking any risks. So I think nothing teaches you risk like losing a little bit of money. And I was really grateful that when my son first invested in cryptocurrencies
mentioned
or
that,
NFTs,
yes.
he lost money. And he was really, really upset about the opportunity cost. He could have made a lot of money, but he didn't sell and went down. And that was the best lesson for him, because that will stand him in good stead for the rest of his life. So back to your question. Some people will just, more than anything else, want to have a home, have their own house or have their own apartment. And if you can save for a deposit for that, if you can be disciplined and do that, then that's a great goal. It's a really great goal. It's hard though, because particularly in Sydney, and capital cities in Australia, all around the place, prices are really expensive, and it's really hard
Very much so.
to get a foot in. So what do you do? Well, there's no easy answer. You just have to make sacrifices. You have to remember, we talked, and I think in the first episode we talked about paying yourself first. So one of the easiest things to do is to spend your salary, spend what you earn, and then look at what you've got left over, and hey, there's nothing there. What you want to do is pay yourself first.
It's such a good
So
thing.
you
and
mean
I
like as in
and I like
rent
to
and
hear that
utilities, that sort of thing? or
again and
food?
again.
No.
When you say pay yourself, as in
So you
to
get
go
your-
out?
So
Yeah.
that's
so what
spending
what
money.
do you mean by that, pay
So-
yourself first?
So have a wealthing account. So not a savings account, it's a wealthing
I
account.
like the name of that one.
It's an account that you put aside and you don't access. It's for building your wealth.
So is that a bit
Right?
like, say, people
you
do that with
pay-
super because you're not going
Yeah.
to access
So
it?
this is
till
outside
the-
of super.
you know.
My brain's going savings.
Yeah, no, different.
No, okay,
Different. Okay,
okay,
so wealthing is not savings. Savings is saving for a car.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's a depreciating asset. That goes down
Oh, I
after you
love
buy
this.
it.
I love
right?
this.
Or saving for a
identifying.
holiday. That's a
Yes.
savings account that
Yes.
you're saving. Wealthing is for building wealth. So you set up an account, you pay yourself, you pay out of your salary account where you're receiving your pay, and you transfer it immediately into your wealthing account and make that 10% or 12% of what you earn.
I love the terminology, wealthy account.
You know
Put
what?
that
Same
aside.
here. I've got to say, I haven't heard that before. I've mentioned,
either.
I've heard you say, and I think it's a really good thing. Pay yourself, and I get it. Whether it's 10%, you put that because you need to do that first. It's like anything, your oxygen mask on.
Yeah.
But a wealthing account in your 30s, 20s, 30s, that's a really great thing to do because
but I need a wealthy account to go shopping too.
yeah, that's right. I think you need your
if
diet.
it's 3 a.m. and I've
passes
seen
are-
an outfit on
But you
Instagram.
need your
It's all
wealthing one with
collectible.
the, with
Can I
the
get
lock
some-
and key, and you
can
can't
I-
access it for a
Yeah.
while. You know,
Right,
I think that's it.
So let me complete.
I'd have an axe. And
But I think that's really good. But also, just Roger, just the feedback I'm hearing too is that it still is, they're earning sometimes such a small amount or whatever.
Yes.
How can you, even this tiny amount, but does that add up over time?
Look,
Is it
there's
still
no
worth
way
it?
of escaping this. Can I tell you?
Yes.
If you are in your 20s and 30s and you want to get wealthy, you're not going to do it from saving. You're not going to do it from saving your salary. You have to have a side hustle or start a business or, come up with an idea, get together with some other people and, I said earlier, take a risk, have a go. That's what you've got to do.
This is great
we've
advice.
got,
really
Yeah.
good advice.
We've
Just
got
not
Sandra from my office in the room
Yeah.
here.
Ooh,
She's only
Sandra.
7. She's only 7 years old,
Yes,
but
yeah.
Start young.
she's got a side
She's
hustle.
a spunky
Yeah.
7-year-old.
And I'm a huge advocate for doing entrepreneurial things
Love
and
it.
trying things. Sandra's an
Races
amazing
fast cars. It's no surprise.
Sandra's an amazing trader of clothing. That's what she does.
well, I'm a
She
good friend of
buys and
yours.
sells clothing, and she does it really, really well.
I love
She's
it.
embarrassed now, but
But she's taking a
that's
little bit of a
'cause she's
risk.
7,
She's
like-
stepping out.
Everyone listening to that, I think that's really good advice. Look,
Very
and
good.
it's not everyone's cup of tea.
It's
Some
true.
people don't want to do side hustles, and some people are very comfortable just
But what I'm
staying in their
saying is
lane.
if you're-
It's
yeah,
the time to do it.
That's
if you
fine,
want
but
to.
I'm saying if you are keen to get ahead, if you
Yep.
really you can feel that drive in you, and I can't describe it. You either have it or some
Yeah.
people just don't, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you've got that drive, I know I'm built for more. I know I can do something else. I know, then have a crack.
Listen
have
to
a
the
go.
calling.
Give it a shot.
Yeah,
give it a
go.
shot.
And
Well,
that's
I
the age in your
love
20s
that.
especially.
Okay.
Now in your 30s,
Yeah.
things are starting to settle down. You might have met someone, maybe not. That's okay. But you're starting to think
There's
about
wedding
the
bells
future.
and all these things.
Yeah, can we
you
just
know.
talk about weddings for a minute?
Yes, yeah, please.
That
yeah.
is insane what people are spending.
Out
Oh,
of
minimum
control.
with 100K
You're
before
setting-
you.
It's
start.
actually, and it's more the pressure on the parents. Let's be honest.
Well,
know?
Kerry and I paid for our own wedding,
Yeah.
but our
You were
entire
before your
wedding and
time.
reception was $25,000. And we that was in
my
when
husband
was
and
that?
I went
98.
we went
Yeah.
overseas because the
She's
dollar
one of
was
8.
it was below 50 cents, and I went, and Chernobyl had just happened. I went, no one's coming. We just flew to little island Mykonos. In those days wasn't big what it is now.
Yeah.
And Mum and Dad flew over, and his parents flew over, and I had a friend from London. It was the best fun ever. I didn't sleep for about 4 days. And I thought, wow. And we used that money to go on a honeymoon for 3
Yeah.
months.
But there are
know?
kids now who don't think that they're spending $150,000 on a wedding,
Yeah.
which think about that's
cray-cray.
That's
Sorry.
a deposit for a home.
I don't get it personally.
Yes, yeah.
And a home is a depreciating asset. Yes, you'll have some nice photos.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
I remember, and this is
You can doctor them
this
up.
is not
but
my advice, but
Put a few more
And you know
heads
what?
in.
I've got to
We
say,
had 100 people
I've
there.
got to say, too, each to their own. We know a lot of our friends just
Yes.
recently and their
Yeah.
kids, and there's a lot of money
Absolutely.
on
It's
their
hard
weddings,
to
and
give-
it's
Yeah.
their big thing.
It
and
is.
So some people, it's their number one thing in life.
It is.
And if they want to blow money on that,
Great.
let them do
and
it.
that's the
Fine.
choice you make.
But it's a
But you've
personal
made-
thing. But
and
you
it
know,
is
you're not gonna-
beautiful.
But that's a huge amount of money that could be used for the subject that we're talking about today, which is getting
Wealthing.
becoming secure and confident in
And
investing in your future.
Security
I love
is,
it.
is
Yeah.
a big thing. You know, we're
Yeah.
sort of saying that, like with the roof over your head. And
So we're going to
and
start
that's-
moving up.
Well,
We're
let's
gonna-
move up with the
we're gonna-
generations.
And
We've
when
got
I say,
20s,
Can I say one more thing, Di?
you're not
If
allowed
you've
to. Of
met-
course you are.
If you've met the right person,
Yeah.
if you've met the right person, then whether you have a $150,000 wedding or a $50,000 wedding, the relationship's going to be the same. You're not going to have a better relationship for having spent $150,000 on your wedding. You know, the quality of your life together is not dependent on how much you spend at that wedding. So think about that when you're spending that money. Otherwise you're just having a big party. It's a very expensive party.
You're not wrong.
You know
I
what?
agree with you.
Wise words,
Yeah.
and
See, my dad
it comes back to
had
relationships
the
too,
same
doesn't it? And
attitude.
what's
Always.
really, you've always sort of said that, and tune into our other past money episodes because they're so good and heartfelt, and really what's
Yeah.
important. And you sort of mentioned that what is more important in life? It's relationships,
And
isn't
what's
it?
the thing that
Always.
you and I
It's
got
all
to?
that we
Truth
have.
and relationships.
The
all that we
road
have.
from your head
So-
to your heart is the longest road you'll
Yes.
take.
I know.
We're so affected by some of the words
So
that you use.
Oh, thank
they're
you.
really
Truly.
good things to think
We
about.
talk about it a lot.
And it moves
Okay.
me nearly nearly to tears.
We could
You've
talk
seen
for
me in
3 days
tears.
with Roger.
No.
Okay, we're going to move through the generations. The next one
What about
is
Generation X, baby?
We're going into the 40s and 50s.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
So we're moving into
The
that.
Gen X.
So this is where
I haven't finished my
Oh,
question.
sorry, go ahead,
come
Di.
on.
Forgive me.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just giving you a hard
Well, that's
time.
when everyone's juggling,
No.
aren't they?
Many of our listeners are within this range, 40s and 50s. They're juggling so much, careers, family, aging parents. And they tell us, I've spent so many years looking after everyone else. Now I feel behind with money. I've just gone through a divorce and feel like I'm starting over. And lastly, I own a business and some property. But I'm not sure my money's working. This is one I can relate to. I'm not sure my money's working hard enough. Now, Roger, you can answer now.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there's a few there, isn't there? You know,
Okay.
Yeah, well.
Yes, the boy at the back of the class.
the cheeky boy.
Which is where I always
The
was,
cheeky
by the
Me
way.
too.
Oh.
Okay, that's a big
with the
lot,
good
a lot to
mum.
unpack.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So you're now thinking very seriously about money. You've got kids at school, probably, or maybe. You may have a mortgage. You may not. But okay, let's talk about the scenario where you've got a mortgage, because this is a really important thing. A mortgage has an interest rate on it. And if you are working full time, you don't own a business, you don't have any other ways of receiving dividends or income, you're getting a salary, you're receiving a salary. You may be in the highest possible tax bracket. You are paying the interest on that mortgage from your after-tax dollars. So you've already paid tax on that money. Now, that means that the interest rate that you're paying isn't really the pre-tax interest rate. It's the post-tax interest rate. Now, let me explain that. If we gross up, it's this little math trick we do. If we gross up the interest rate for your tax rate, then the interest rate is much higher. So let's say interest rates on a mortgage at the moment are 6%. Well, if you're on the highest tax bracket, it's closer to 9%.
Yeah,
Right, I get that.
Right? It's closer to 9%. Your effective pre-tax.
Yeah.
So if you take those after-tax dollars and don't put them into your mortgage, then you're foregoing a 9% return
Okay.
on your money.
Right.
Now, it's not that easy to get 9% elsewhere.
Yeah.
Even the stock market, with all the volatility that it has, and with Trump trying to be an authoritarian dictator at the moment, and all of that, you can disagree with me on that. That's fine. We'll talk about that in another podcast.
Yeah, lots to talk about there, isn't there?
Whatever. With all the volatility that transpires around the world and the stock markets go up and down, they give you about 8 or 9%, over the long run. That's about it. So 9% pre-tax on your mortgage is a safe, guaranteed, certain return. You are guaranteed to get 9% pre-tax return if you pay your mortgage down as fast as possible.
So that's going to be a really good aim. If you've even got that extra money, paying your mortgage down as quick as you can.
Correct.
Is a really smart move.
Yeah,
so
where a
it's
lot of
really good
people are
just
like
to be
sheep.
reinforcing on that, because sometimes it's just like, even if I can just stretch to pay the mortgage.
Well, I get a lot of people who ask me, I've got a mortgage, where else should I be investing? No. 9% pre-tax
Good,
is a
that's
really
really
good
good.
It's a good starting
return.
point. Yeah.
Put it on the mortgage. Now, other
Right.
people will say, there are other advisors out there who will say, no, I can get you, a better return than that. Prove it.
Right.
Okay, well, can I
Yeah.
ask
Prove
also
you can
another
get
question
better
as
than
well?
that.
What
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
people forget also when you're talking about that, paying off, and so many people are living on their credit cards too,
Yeah.
and they're forgetting, what's the interest on that?
Huge.
Well, what's interesting at
So,
the moment,
do
there's
we do that?
Huge.
Because
It's
sometimes
amazing.
people forget about
It's
it.
amazing
I
you brought
do.
that up, because I was
Yeah.
just looking at a stat over the weekend, and in the United States and in Australia, the number of people paying the minimum amount on their credit cards
Yes.
is going up at a very, very fast rate.
I've heard that.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
know
So
about
when
those
you're
people.
talking about that, let's get to the sort of nuts and bolts of things, because a
it's-
lot of people there,
it's
they
scary.
might be doing that, but also on the reality now, they've got, they might have 5, 10K plus on their credit card, and
Yeah.
they're continuously doing
Yeah.
it
Well,
without
it's
even
a lot
thinking
more than
about
that.
things.
It's up to 20%.
Yeah.
It can be.
So what do we do?
Pretty
consolidating-
scary.
Well, you need to get that down.
Right.
It comes back to behaviour
I mean,
and
you
discipline,
said it.
doesn't
The
it?
entrance is huge.
Yeah.
Remember
It's
earlier I
reminders.
talked about putting aside that wealthing money.
Yes.
Yeah.
The purpose of that is to only spend what you've got left over.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead, what most people do is they spend everything they've got
reverse.
and then they're not putting anything into their wealthy account. So I can't help people if they don't help themselves.
Right,
No.
fair
They
enough.
need to be disciplined. You need to stop spending money. You need to live within your means. And that sounds like, oh gosh, I'm
Boring,
We've just lost half your listeners.
Yeah.
Diane. Well, I'm sorry,
But
They're
you know
going,
what?
don't
We
put
actu-
Roger on the show again. That's terrible.
We don't want that
We don't want that
reminder.
old fuddy-duddy telling us
Exactly.
we
I want a
can't
new
have
We
fun.
Roger.
we do
Yeah.
need to hear that, and
gosh.
and
You
people
got to have
are-
a stinging slap sometimes.
and
you
people
know.
are into
It's too
everything
easy to
now.
buy.
Recycling clothes, it's all become actually quite on trend now
Yes.
to do
Yeah.
all these things there. But I think it's
Yeah.
really good reminders.
So
what
back
you're
to the
saying,
40
Roger.
people in their 40s
Yeah.
particularly.
Yeah.
Getting down that mortgage, if
Yeah.
you've got a mortgage, that's a really great return on your money. So that's number one if you're in
Yep.
that position. You're now starting to think about accumulate people who hit their sort of 40s or mid 40s. It's when they first start thinking about preparing for retirement. Believe it or not, seems way too young to be thinking about that. But that typically is what happens. People hit their 40s and they go, oh, far out. I'm closer to my retirement than I am to when I was 20. Or I'm getting there. So I need to start thinking about this. What am I going to be saving for? What am I going to be wealthing for? So it's really important now to start thinking about having an investment portfolio or developing an investment portfolio. There's lots of different assets that you can invest in, lots of different classes of assets. So there's shares, and we've talked about that briefly in the past. So, there are small company shares, and I like to think about a boat. So think about a boat. So when you think about your portfolio, you're building a boat. You need a hull. You need the hull of that boat. That's the core part of your portfolio. That's where most of the money is. That's what keeps you floating, it keeps you afloat and keeps you dry and safe. But then you also you're going somewhere, so you need an outboard engine on that boat. Sorry for all the yachties.
I'm
this
a yachty.
is a stink
You just
boat.
offended me.
This is a stink boat.
Yeah.
And you're putting an outboard engine on. Even yachts have a small outboard engine in case of emergency.
Remember that?
Well, some
board.
do. Some
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
So you want an outboard engine on that, and that's going to be your growth assets. That's going to be the things that are going to help increase. And we'll talk about, you know what, I've just remembered in a future podcast, we'll talk about the 3-bucket strategy.
Yes,
We'll do that.
I've heard about it, but I don't know about it.
No, we really want to
know.
But it's a lot to it.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a bit
refining
to
this.
it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you
But I
need
like
that
the
outboard
boat.
engine, and then if you've got anything left over, you might allocate something to a little turbo on your outboard engine.
Okay.
And that's where you have your
Speed it
smallest
up.
amount of money, and that's where it might be things like, small cap stocks, for example. The younger you are, the more likely your outboard engine is the small cap stocks where you're getting a lot of growth. But as you get older, you might refine that, and it might be things like private equity. Or it could be a long short fund, or these sorts
and we
of
want
things.
to talk a bit further about that because we don't really know too much about
No,
it.
don't worry.
Yes.
Don't worry about it for now.
No.
I'm not going to worry, but we want to hear about
I
it.
know.
I'm going to tell you about it, but,
Yeah.
but that we'll build on on this foundation,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about those things
Yeah.
in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
But for now, if you're in your 40s
Yeah.
and heading into your 50s,
Which a lot of our listeners are.
you
know.
need to have paid off the mortgage if that's possible. Get that down as much as possible, and then
goal.
start building growth assets. Now, it's really important. Your only objective in all of this is to maintain or build something called purchasing power. So let me explain what that is. So
Because I only know that from buying clothes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
purchase.
well, okay. So I'll give you an example. In my 20s, it wasn't until my mid-20s that I started to get the taste for red wine. Right? Prior to that, I'd take a dessert wine to a party. I didn't like coolers.
Wow.
I didn't like coolers, and I didn't like
those
beer.
Days, I used to even drink masala and Coke. Can you believe that?
Yeah,
As a
yeah.
teenager
Nicola.
then.
Nicola.
Remember Maduri?
Despicable.
Maduri lemonade?
Maduri, I do.
Maduri
yeah.
lemonade.
Remember that?
I
Porphyry Pearl, Matus
Apparently,
Rosé.
blokes aren't meant to admit they liked Maduri and lemonade,
so
but I did. And I didn't like beer, so I always had a shandy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, That's it. I won't say what I was going to say, actually. I'll zip
so
it.
funny.
I'm zipping it, Rog.
I put
Moving on,
lemonade in
Rog.
my beer.
I don't know,
It's
Rog.
terrible.
That's so
I know,
funny.
it's
I'm not going to be
terrible.
having
So
drinks.
you
Anyway.
I know.
Anyway.
No, but then he's
Point
for
is-
true in his taste. He likes red wine.
Yeah, so then
he's
I
been
like
drinking
that.
the port.
And the bottle the wine that I tasted out the back of the Orpheum in Neutral Bar Cremorne,
Yeah, Cremorne.
in Cremorne, the Cremorne Orpheum.
Yeah.
Out the back there was a bottle shop there,
Yeah.
and the guy in the shop introduced me to St Henri Claret,
Oh, hello.
which was back when you could call it
yes,
Claret,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But get this, it was $14.99 a bottle.
Wow.
So at 25, 26 years of age, I could afford that.
Yes,
You know, that
yes.
was a wine I could drink. You know, I couldn't have Grange. Couldn't
Did you
afford
meet
that
Kerry
at the
at
time.
that stage?
No, not
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Kerry from the ferry
Okay, right.
hadn't
Kerry from
turned
the
up.
ferry, okay.
So anyway, but the thing is, today that wine is $170.
I had
$70
one on the weekend.
Superb. Ooh,
$170.
did you?
I was very
So
excited.
I cracked one open on the weekend as well,
Oh,
but
wow.
mine was a 2003.
I actually didn't look at the date. I just drank it.
And it's
So-
drinking beautifully at the moment. Anyway,
yeah.
the thing is now it's
Thirsty,
$170. So we were talking, remember we were talking about purchasing power?
Yes, yeah.
So if you want to maintain your purchasing power, then that means whatever bottle of wine you like today, you want to be able to still afford to drink it in 5 or 10 or 20 years' time. Right? That's what maintaining your purchasing power is.
Okay.
So because of inflation, things get more expensive over time, and we've just
Yeah.
demonstrated that with the St Henri. That's probably a bit faster than general inflation,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, if I liked my St Henri back in 1995 and I want to drink it now in 2025, well, I need to maintain or grow my purchasing power. So investing is just about that. It's about maintaining what you can afford today or growing what you can afford today in the future. So being able to buy more of what you like today or buying the same amount of what you like today, that's maintaining or growing your purchasing power. The purpose of investing, the purpose of allocating money to different things is just about that. If you can remember that, then it's not very confusing.
You know what? That's really
You're
good to hear that because it simplifies it,
Resonates.
doesn't it?
It
It
You're
does.
really
just
makes
trying
it,
to achieve that.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
And the other thing is
Because you
people...
don't want to overcomplicate it, you know, like that's sort of a simple way of sort of,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is.
I
And-
like hearing that.
And
Yeah.
people need to understand the return that they need to get in order to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we hear the official statistics are inflation's 3%. Well, most people my age would scoff at that. There's nothing that I buy that goes up 3%. Everything goes up by a lot more than 3%. So where on earth do these economists get these statistics that say inflation is 3%? Because that's not my personal experience.
Yeah.
And so that means we need a return better than 3%. Otherwise, if we keep all our money in a inverted commas savings account where you don't get any interest, by the way, you're going backwards.
Yeah.
So people say, "Oh, cash isn't risky. Having money in the bank isn't risky." Well, what could be more risky than being guaranteed to lose purchasing power?
Yeah.
That's an
yeah.
incredibly risky thing
Yeah.
to do. You know,
what
you're going to lose.
Yeah.
If you keep your money in the bank at no interest, you earn no interest, no return on that money for a year, you are guaranteed to be able to afford less in a year's time than you can afford today.
You know what, Boom?
Incredible.
It's good to hear
That's
that.
very risky.
Very
It's really
risky.
good to hear that because a lot of people were sort of saying, especially as they're older,
Yeah.
a bit more, was it risk averse?
Or say it's safe.
Yes.
It's safe.
And banks were
Yeah.
sort of safe. But it's
Yeah,
great
but
when
you're
you're
going
younger, you can
backwards.
take the risk. And then you're talking about like that, the mid-age there, you mightn't take as much risk. But you're taking a big risk by just what you've got there, leaving it in your bank because you're going backwards. So I love hearing that because I needed that reminder.
And so one of the things that we do, and you shoot me down, Di, if you want to, but one of the things I'll slot in now is an asset class called private credit.
Yeah.
Because private credit, there are lots of different private credit funds out there. The ones that we distribute in Australia are generating between 7 and 9.5%.
Can you just
per
explain
year.
just briefly again, for people tuning in again, like
Really? I'm writing
what's
that
private
down.
credit? If someone's just listening in now,
So
That's
it's not
huge.
there's no stock market exposure.
Right.
In the old days, if you had said to me 15 years ago or before
Take
the GFC...
this slowly, because I need to hear
Yeah,
it.
that's, I mean, we need reminders of what it is.
Before the global financial crisis, if you'd said to me, Roger, I want to lend some money to a small or medium-sized business in Australia, or lots of different businesses. I want to spread my loans out across lending to all these small and medium-sized businesses. I would have said, Nicola, you've got rocks in your head. Don't do it. And the reason why I would have said that is because the banks, the big banks in Australia, they'd stitched up that market. They were lending to those businesses all the time. So the only businesses you could lend to would be the risky ones that the banks didn't want to touch, right?
Yeah.
That's all changed since the global financial crisis, because what happened is the regulators all around the world, not just in Australia, but the regulators have insisted that the banks have a certain amount of capital for certain types of lending. And it meant that lending to small and medium-sized businesses in Australia was just too capital intensive. It wasn't profitable for them, so they've pulled back from that lending. And now there's a big gap in Australia, particularly, of about, call it $400 billion, where that's the gap between what businesses would like to borrow for growth and what the banks are willing to give them. And so that gap is now being filled by non-bank lenders, and those non-bank lenders are being funded by private investors and private credit funds.
Got it.
Right. So a private credit fund is a fund that employs what are called, this is getting technical, but they're called originators. They're the non-bank lenders. They're filling in that gap that the banks have left, and they're lending money. They're assessing loans. They're marketing their services and assessing the applications, and then lending money to businesses. And you might think, oh, this sounds really, really risky. Well, there's layers of protection, and you've got to dig into these. But for example, there might be directors' guarantees. There might be covenants on the property. There might be covenants over the farm if it's a loan to an agricultural loan. It could be invoicing finance, and that's where, for example, you've got someone growing blueberries, and they've sold their blueberries to Coles and Woolies, but Coles and Woolies don't pay the blueberry grower for 3 months. And so the blueberry farmer says, well, I actually want to plant a new crop and I need cash now.
Yeah.
So he'll sell that what's owed, the credit, if you like, that invoice, he'll sell that at a discount and borrow the money. And so there's a loan financing that invoice purchase.
Right.
And so
you can start planting.
So now your
again.
credit risk is with Coles and Woolworths not paying, which is pretty low risk. Right?
Okay.
So
it's interesting. So it's a really safe area then, because I think.
I won't say that.
Okay.
I won't say that. It's not like a bank account.
Okay.
No, I
Right?
understand.
It's not a bank account, but you can assess the risks because the fund managers are required to be very transparent and disclose
and you'll
what
know
the
what
risks
the fund's
are.
worth and
Yeah.
everything
And
else.
so the private credit funds that we distribute, there's 14,000 loans. They're across 40 different industries. The originators put up a first loss piece. So if a loan went bad, the originator has to cover that loss before the investors in the fund. So there's lots of layers of protection. And that doesn't mean something can't go wrong. It just means you need a lot to go wrong for the investors to be nervous about their capital. It had to go, like, you'd almost need a deep recession or depression, and all the businesses go badly before you're going to see anything.
So this is trending now. This is the way to.
So if
This
we
is
can,
this
this
is
is
big.
really
It's
now.
growing.
Yes.
Because the 50-year-olds that we're talking about, the 50-year-olds that we're talking about, as people get older, they're more and more, they're now more and more inclined to invest where there's less volatility.
That's
right, such as the share market.
Yeah, so the stock
Where
market is still a
there's a
great
lot of
place
people
to
are very
invest.
fearful. It is, but there's a lot of people fearful as they're getting older.
Well, they don't understand it. Particularly, we've talked in previous episodes about women who are newly divorced, and it was their ex-husbands who looked after the finances and did the investing.
Yes.
And remember, I encouraged women by saying that lots of studies show that women are better investors than men.
And we've got women tuning in now because we do want to learn more.
They're more thorough.
It's not too late to start, is it, Roger?
They're less compulsive. Women
Yeah.
tend to be less compulsive. They tend to be less spur of the moment. They tend to be more reserved and more conservative and more thoughtful.
Unless they're
so they can be
shopping
so be
online.
confident that as a woman you're a powerful investor. You can be a good investor, but some people just don't want the risk of the stock market. They don't want the volatility, and they're worried that their investments could fall 50%, which can happen from time to time.
But more so, though, if we're moving into the 60s and
Yes.
70s, like into
this is
that
where
era,
Yeah.
it's
The
more
boomers.
prevalent where you start panicking.
And that's another
oh, my God, have
reason-
I got enough to, like how much,
Yeah.
everyone's living longer, oh, God, have I got enough,
Yeah.
have I got everything in place? So that's fear that
Well, that's
emerges
the thing. If
too.
you're retiring today,
Yeah.
if you're retiring now at 65 years of age,
Yeah.
it might shock you, but you've got potentially 30 years of spending and living that you have to fund.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
so you
correct.
still need to get a good return on your money.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't go super conservative and put it all in a term deposit and get 4.5%
No, the
or
private
4%.
credit, when you said 7 to 9%, I was like, yes.
Well,
You know,
that's
yeah.
certainly what
Bingo.
the two funds that we distribute at Montgomery in Australia. That's what the returns have been.
I love this.
Since the inception of the funds, and they've
So
paid
that's positive, isn't it?
Well,
You
and
know?
they've also paid monthly income.
I find it really attractive.
And they've not thus far they've not had a negative month. One of the funds is almost 8 years old. It's paid monthly income.
Are you serious?
And it's never had
What?
a negative month. It's because it's not the stock market. It's
No,
not going up and
the
down.
It's such a
volatility.
good thing to hear because honestly, I didn't know that there was all these options out there, and that
So-
just seems. I like the idea of getting paid monthly because I think a lot of things is just to get even whatever stream it is, just to get some stream of income coming in on a monthly basis.
And can we just come back to returns for a second?
Yeah.
You see, this is really important because I think a lot of people in Australia don't know what return they're getting.
No.
And so this is for all those people out there who have an investment advisor, who have a substantial amount of money invested in a portfolio. I challenge you to work out what your total return was last year. Get that number because a lot of people don't know that
true.
number. And you hear people. I see it on TV. I see it on on the social media. I bought this house and I've doubled my money. I bought this house and doubled my money.
You hear that?
Yeah, but
real estate.
Yeah, but you owned the house for 15 years. If you doubled your money over 15 years, or let's say you doubled it over 10 years, that's only 6 or 7% return per annum. That's not that great.
When you hear it that way.
That's not that great.
On that note, if let's just say I own my own house,
Yeah.
and I own an investment property,
Yes.
right?
Well, yeah,
Okay, I want to look at that versus investing in versus something like it's safe,
Like private
because
credit.
it's still real estate,
Sure.
but it's my second property. It's an investment property as such.
So let's say it was an apartment.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's an apartment, right?
Sydney apartments
Right.
over the long run.
And I own my own house, right? So that's going to
Sydney
be
apartments
tax-free.
over the long run have risen by about 6 or 7%
Yeah.
per annum.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Now, if it's an investment property,
Yes.
you're going to pay capital gains tax
This
on
is
that
my
as
point.
well.
I'm trying to
so,
look at-
So that's
Yeah.
going to take and if it's in your own name,
Yeah.
then that capital gains tax rate is going to be your marginal tax rate. So that's going to be, if you're at the highest tax rate, that's going to be almost half. So you'll get a discount, of course, because you've held it for more than a year. You've held the asset for more than a year. But you're talking about, 25% reduction in your profit because of the capital gains tax. And these are rough, very rough
Yeah.
numbers, just to get conceptual. So take 25% off that 7%, and that'll be your net capital gain over the period that you hold that property. Now, the other problem is that if you own an investment property, yes, you can touch it and feel, you can point to it.
Yeah.
Some people like to boast about how many
Yeah.
properties
Yeah,
they've
they
got.
do, yeah,
I
yeah.
prefer just don't talk about it. Better people don't know. But if you do, if that's what you like, then fine. But I've just given you an alternative
Yeah.
investment
Yes.
that does 7.5% or 9.5%, depending on which fund.
So what are we looking at for
and
the
you're not
average
maintaining
investment
it.
property?
You don't have to replace the stove. You don't have to
all
replace
the costs that
I'm
it
loving
is running.
this,
I think
yep.
It's
Land
amazing to
tax.
hear it,
Yep.
isn't it?
no
Land
land
tax,
tax.
yeah.
You don't have to worry about maintenance. You don't have to worry about paying a real estate agent a management fee.
Right, you have to watch these real estate agents, don't you?
Oh, and then
I'm
if you're
actually loving
Airbnb,
this.
and if you're
So in
Airbnb it,
comparison
Yeah.
to an investment property, in summing up,
Well,
I mean,
I've done the analysis on this, and it's slightly in the under 10 years, it's slightly in favour of private credit.
Wow.
Over a longer period of time, then there are some benefits because you get the compounding effect of the property.
Yeah.
So you're getting 6% on 100% plus 6%, and then next year it's 6% on 100 plus 6 plus 6. So you're getting
that's
that
getting
compounding.
a bit carried away there.
Sorry
in
about
my
that.
brain.
No.
But ultimately, assessing an investment property versus private credit, you're up.
Do you know what? It might not be as sexy. Private credit might not be as sexy as
I love
property.
that. As
but
bricks
over
and mortar,
over a 10-year period, then
or less.
The returns are I think are superior out of it.
No, not you think. I believe Like, seriously.
I can't be definitive about these things because of private credit.
I think it's interesting now just for
Nothing's
listeners just to be
guaranteed.
aware that real estate isn't always
Yeah.
the thing that we always sort of maybe thought it was. It's great to have a roof over your head. It's great to have your own sort of property and if you can have someone else. But if you're talking about investing. But let's go even a bit with some of our listeners as well.
Oh, yes.
Not everyone, and it's wonderful when you've got that, but not everyone's in that situation. As you were sort of saying, you might be retiring at 65 and we've got another 30 plus years ahead of us. And they're going, well, I haven't actually got all that amount. Maybe now I'm going to have to keep on working.
Yes.
Or maybe or I'm in the situation, I'm divorced, or I've just met somebody new. And we've got a lot now that have come in, and just some interesting feedback too is like the chances are you're going to meet sort of somebody and you've been remarried before or they've remarried. There's blended families, there's kids there. What do you do with whatever, mate? You might have the tiny pool or they've got a big pool of money. What's your advice sort of with finance and relationships in the early days? Like, 'cause it's like a big thing at the moment.
Well, I'd be surprised if you disagree with me, Nicola, given what you've gone through.
Yes, yeah.
But I think until you're absolutely certain, you keep your finances separate.
I agree.
And how long?
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. And I don't know how long. Yes. I'm not in your shoes, so I don't know.
I'm just sort of saying from a financial thing, is there some sort of warning or is there something, or is it fine just to go, hey, be transparent and this is what I've got?
I really think, you don't know someone until you know their attitude to money. And what they tell you and the way they behave could be two vastly different things. And you need time together to see how they behave with respect to money. They might say all the right words, but, they're quite frivolous with money and you're not, and that's not fair.
No. And there can be sometimes, it's interesting, you hear different stories to these people with these gambling issues or the whole thing, and you don't know
until you know
you
them.
But you sort of think, when we're sort of thinking, you've had lifetimes of decades, and we're talking, seeing we're like this age as well, and people have got whatever investments that they may have, and it's just on the cards now with relationships. You're bound to meet sort of somebody new, and another thing came up, it was very interesting. You sort of caused a bit of a stir, and it was great, Roger, with when you're talking about the wills in the last one.
Oh, yes.
And it was good because, people sort of saying, you split it and whatever. But then
it's the worst, one of the worst things I've ever heard.
Isn't it funny?
I want all my kids to benefit equally.
Yeah.
It's never equal.
No, it was a great.
But
I
another
love
listener
that.
had actually had put a comment and really liked what you had to say, but they also said, but your children, whatever, haven't met sort of somebody, a new partner, and they can come in and they can change all of a sudden the views of that. So whatever. So do you just keep on doing it to please your children? Or do you ultimately do it to what suits yourself?
Well, we've talked about that as well. Have that discussion with your children.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
But separately to your new partner.
Yeah.
It's
right. Now let's hear that, everyone.
There's a different relationship there with your children and your new partner. And they will have vastly different expectations about what you're going to provide.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I think that's worth discussing because we had discussed that about the wills, and your partner's come along and you've got your children who've been there forever, and then you've got sort of someone else coming on the scene and all of a sudden going, well, hang on, I might, I lived with you for 2 years or 3 years, all of a sudden I've got access to this.
Yeah,
so...
there's ways around, there's trust you can set up too.
There's amazing wisdom in that phrase, walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Yes.
Right? You put yourself in your kids' shoes and ask yourself, how would you feel if their dad or their mum had shacked up with this new person and now they're supporting them and not us anymore. You know, how would that feel? Are you okay with that? You know, you're probably not. I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
and every
It's happening.
situation is
It's
I'm
different.
not a marriage counsellor.
No, Roger,
But
but
it's
it's just
happening every
interesting.
day.
I just
It's
wanted to
true.
bring it up because these are some of the things that have been brought up to us after listening to you as well.
Yes.
Because it's money and relationships, everything's all tied in together.
Yeah.
And there are things also at
Well,
this
don't tie it
sometimes-
together too soon.
Okay,
Exactly.
there we
Yeah.
go.
Great advice.
All right,
Yeah.
go on that boat trip.
Give
And
people give the new person enough rope to hang themselves.
I like that.
You know, and by that I mean, but can I just clarify?
in the nicest
I
possible
think that
way.
is good.
Time.
Yeah,
Give, people are real. People are flawed. We're not perfect. There's no one out there who's perfect.
and we think in the early
know?
days they
So
are.
true.
And
So,
everyone says, oh, I'm a good person. Well, no, you just did a U-turn over double lines,
Yes.
yesterday. You're not that good.
Whoopsie.
No one,
you know?
Whoops.
no
Yeah.
one's perfect.
No one's perfect.
And if you want that in this world,
You're
your
kidding
head's
yourself.
so far
Yeah.
buried in the sand.
So just let enough time to pass for people to be
So
real,
true.
and then
Yeah.
then you can make you can make an informed decision. And when it comes to money, it's about information. You know, you always want to be informed when you're making financial decisions, because some of those decisions, particularly, when you're young, you can make mistakes. As we get older, and we've talked about different generations, but as you get older, those mistakes become less affordable. So you have to get it right. So if you're partnering up with someone new, time.
Yeah, because sometimes they're also in a vulnerable situation that they are,
Of course
that they
you are.
could be, like they've been left or they're all of a sudden they're sort
Well,
of
you're
find
heartbroken.
and they're heartbroken,
Vulnerable.
and they can
Vulnerable,
do
exactly.
decisions that they mightn't have normally done. So I think sort of sometimes.
Oh,
that's,
and can I say,
Yeah.
sorry, there's one thing I wanted to talk about and I didn't get the chance to mention. I just want to give people a rule about returns. Just a
Okay,
little.
yeah,
It's a really
please.
simple thing. If when people say they've doubled their money or they bought a house and it went up
yeah.
twofold or threefold, to put that into context, just remember this. If you're making a 15% return every year, which is very high, by the way, 15% return every year, you're doubling your money every 5 years.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
15%
Yeah,
equates
yeah.
to 5
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
So if you
Yeah,
bought a
yeah.
house for $1 million 5 years ago
Yeah.
and you sell it today for $2 million, that's 15% per annum.
Yep.
If you bought it for $1 million 5 years ago and today you sell it for less than that, less than $2 million, then that's something less than 15%.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure is. Isn't
And
it?
if you're
Yeah.
doubling your money over 10 years, then that's about 7%, 6 to 7%.
Interesting.
So when people boast about, hey, I doubled my money on this and that, ask how many years it was over.
It's a very good point.
It's a very good point, isn't
and then
it?
you'll know whether the return, then you can start comparing returns, because you know that a bank account, a term deposit's going to give you 4.5% or thereabouts,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Now, there are some people, if they look at the capital gain on their property and then they take off what they put into it, all the expenses and everything else, then their return might only be 1 or 2% better than money in a term deposit. Plus all the hassle. You don't get.
It's a lot
You
managing.
can't capitalise
Yeah.
land tax. That's just an expense that doesn't go into the capital value of the property. So it's an expensive exercise. But all I want to say is that in order for you to be informed about different investments, you need to compare returns.
Yeah.
And now you've got a little tool for understanding. It's very simple arithmetic, but 15% a year is doubling your money every 5 years.
It's a good way of looking at it, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and if you-
Because it's actually, once
Yeah.
again, it's kind of simple. I get
That's,
it, you know.
that's hit
Yeah,
the spot,
I like
Rog.
that.
Just
Okay.
lastly,
Yes.
because with you, honestly,
I want to.
I learned so much from you, Roger, and I pray to God the listeners are like me, because we talk about it, don't for weeks.
We're
It's actually bizarre.
becoming money obsessed,
You've-
aren't we?
you've
With everything
actually,
we're loving it. Let alone, we were talking about the grey divorce, and
I
there's
used
so
to be
many
so
things to
fearful
talk
of it.
about.
Now I'm feeling
can't get
more
enough
confident.
information.
Finally,
Yeah.
some practical takeaways. That's
Yes.
all. What's one thing someone in their 30s, 50s, or 70s
Yes.
could do this week to feel more in control of their money?
Yeah, let's get a Roger tip on that.
Doesn't matter what age you are. I really think what we talked about earlier, that wealthing account. If you're on a salary, if you're on a salary, then pay yourself first. rearrange your bank accounts so that you're taking out money for your future first and then live off what's left over. Don't do it the other way around, because then you'll never get ahead.
Brilliant.
As you get older, if you're starting to do that now when you're older, then get started.
Yeah, and that's
panic a little bit more about getting it going.
That's a good point, though, Roger, because it's great, because we did want to know from the 20s, 30s, and going, all this generations there, and it's fantastic when you're younger. And to hear that earlier, it's just such a good reminder. But a lot of us are starting later.
Yes.
But still, you still keep on starting, and even if you do that small amount, that's really positive.
Can I finish it on this point? It doesn't matter how old you are. Money does not care how old you are.
Okay.
Right? It's not saying I'm going to behave this way for you and I'm going to behave that way for you. It's impartial. And so the way your approach to money should always be the same, irrespective of your age. You should always approach it sensibly and rationally, not emotionally. And the same behaviours that you apply in your 20s and 30s and then in your 40s and 50s and 60s, it's going to stand you in good stead, those same behaviours.
Oh, I love hearing that.
You've shut me up.
I know, exactly.
I'm
you
just
said that with the emotion last time now. And
it's like
with
sprinkle
money.
of just financial dust going through my brain.
I know, but you just said
I hope
such
you
a
don't-
great
now she's
way.
gonna- now you're gonna start
Roger.
dreaming
That's
of
just-
financial
it
dust.
really is so
Shine.
great.
Thank you, Roger.
Well, look,
I
this
always
has
say
just
thank
been-
you.
I know.
Well, thank you.
This
No,
once
really.
again has been so good. We want to sort of
I just love how
so
I make
much
notes
more
through the interview.
But
my own
so
personal notes.
I think really with that, you've wrapped that up really well then, Roger. So if
as
this
usual.
episode, if it's helped you feel more confident about money, and it certainly has with us,
Oh,
hasn't
God,
it, as
yeah.
well too,
Yeah.
please follow and share it with a friend, because,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
ones now already are getting, and a lot of blokes are listening to
Good.
you now as well, getting
Well,
a lot of
someone at
feedback
a
as well.
party,
And-
not
yeah.
last week and the weekend before, asked me. I've been watching Roger.
Yeah.
And I went, Rog?
Yeah.
That's how we call our Rog.
Yeah, Rog,
and I
not
went,
Tommy.
wow, that's fabulous.
I
I
know.
was so impressed. You've got a little bit of a following going on, Rog.
Great.
Yeah.
Including
Look,
And so,
knickers
and we've got all our
dada.
notes,
We've
our
got
show notes here, but we're just saying if you want
Yeah.
to learn more today, www.montinvest.com.
We'll have everything on
we'll
the
have
show
everything in the
notes.
show notes there. So DM us, write to us,
Yeah.
keep on running some more questions.
questions
'cause
are
we're getting
good.
Questions
The questions
good.
are helpful.
And Roger's
And
great
also,
with the
Roger
questions.
kindly also said that they could write in directly to you, can't
Yep.
they?
You can contact
So,
me, contact
yeah.
the team. I'll
Yeah.
answer your questions
He's more than
personally.
happy to personally
Which is-
chat with you, which is incredible.
No problem at all.
So I hope you've just listened. If something's triggered anything for you, Roger is very open to have a chat with you.
For
so,
sure.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't wait to next month.
I can't
because
believe
there's
I'm
so much more to
saying.
talk about.
I can't believe I'm saying I enjoyed talking about
Can I
finance.
just say,
God, how
can we
it
leave on
changed.
one last thing?
Please.
We jump around a lot during the
Yeah.
podcast because we're all so
Funny, though.
excited.
Funny.
You know, it's,
Yeah, well,
anyway,
We've got two chickies here, and
But-
we go from
so-
one thing to the other.
if we've left any gaps,
Yes.
then I'd love it if people who are listening
Yeah.
go, oh, they didn't get around to talking
Brilliant.
about that. Bring
Yep.
that up,
Yep.
and we'll make sure we address it.
We love the dance.
At the next one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
for
great.
these
That's really
particular
good.
potty.
Great, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, everyone, thank you for listening. We'll be back in your ears next month. Yeehaw.
Yay!
Over the
God,
money
that's
fence.
terrifying.
Woo!
August.
It goes so quickly.
Yahoo! Thanks, Rog.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Good.